Using the link in the description to get your first month completely free, HIDIVE lets you watch hundreds of anime TV series, uncensored content, OVAs, and live-action shows on PCs, mobile phones, and consoles. It has a diverse library of exclusive content, Legend of the Galactic Heroes, and Big O, including dubbed content on a regular basis. Click the link in the description for more. In January of this year, geez, that's almost 7 months ago, oh god, I released my first impression of the Lord Elmeloi Episode 0 special, which acted as a primer for people getting ready to watch this anime in the summer. And it's the summer. It's finally arrived, fresh off the cutting boards over at Troika. So here today, I like to give my first impressions of the first 4 episodes of Lord Elmeloi, completely spoiler-free. Enjoy. Based off the manga and light novel of the same name by Makoto Sanda, who is probably most known for Chaos Dragon, a critically panned anime based on a somewhat critically panned manga, follows Waver Velvet from Fate Zero. He is asked to claim the title of Lord Elmeloi II over Rhaenys, a young girl meant to take the throne from Lord Cainith after the events of Fate Zero. Waver will act as a stand-in, and while he does so, he will investigate certain case files from different people with the help of his apprentice, Gray. If you are a massive fan of Waver Velvet and Fate Zero, this anime will be one for you, as it's set in the same timeline as Fate Zero and features more familiar faces like fan favorite Luvia. So, diving into these first 2 episodes, I think the most standout thing is the show's slower, more methodical pace. In episode 1, the show is basically set in one room with a dialogue exchange between both Waver and Rhaenys. During their exchange, they're basically explaining how Waver got into the position that he's currently in, his relation to Melvin, and as well, how he became Lord Elmeloi II. This whole episode was really made by the character Rhaenys, who not only looks sinister and just off, but has some really creepy dialogue that unsettles the viewer, and some creepy visuals, as you can see. And in episode 2, with her being older, she still has that sinister looking face, something I assume that she'll keep as she even gets older. And I think this is all because of Troika's animation and art doing the grunt work. One of Troika's strengths in their previous anime, Bloom Into You, was the facial expressions and visuals. I said as much in all of my previous videos covering the anime. Troika, from a technical perspective, is really good at giving each character their own distinctive visual personality. So much so that I think without Troika's touch, Bloom Into You wouldn't have been as good as it was, as I myself didn't really enjoy the manga, but I loved the anime. Rhaenys is a perfect example of what Troika excels at all in one character. I don't like Rhaenys. I don't want her to succeed in her goals. I think she's a little unsettling. All of these things I knew immediately from the first second I looked at her. That's an accomplishment in any anime, so I wanted to first mention that and commend them for their efforts in that regard. One of the potential strengths this series will have over every other Fate series is how this series will explore the world and universe of Fate Zero much more than in previous installments. Just as an example, in episode 4 we see what a corrupted ley line looks like, and it's both fascinating and beautiful at the same time. This is something the show could potentially be a must-watch for, because how many other anime in the Fate universe explore the setting of Fate like Elmeloi seems to be doing? Not very much from the way I see it, and this one is a wait and see as well, because we don't know what this series plans to do in regards to development of Fate's setting. But even then, we've learned lots of stuff from the Clock Tower already, and various magics and different kind of tools that people use. In one episode, we see Rhaenys use some sort of reality marble-like effect with these marbles she laid out on a table. These are cool additions to the Fate universe because we get to see more of that side. We get to see what everyday magic users are like in this world and how they interact within that world. It seems as the show goes forward, this will be a massive strength for the show if they use it right. But, speaking of strengths, I think the main weakness of this show is how slow those episodes are, which also makes this show a hard sell for casual Fate fans at times. For example, episode 0 and episode 1 don't really tell you what this show will be about, and while episode 0 is optional and can be skipped, that's Still 2 episodes of the show not telling you about the show's main concepts. Instead, episode 1 focuses on reintroducing Waver to the fold through a series of flashbacks, and as well setting up Waver as Lord El-Melloi. It gets the ball rolling, but it isn't until 3 episodes in, with episode 2, that the show begins to show some excitement with the reveal at the end of episode 2. Then, in episode 3, the show really kicks it into gear, and this is where the show starts to show its true colors, and really why I think this show will be pretty good. Each episode introduces something, and with each episode the show's pace improves bit by bit. Episode 0, you have the introduction of the main cast. Nothing too special here, and generally, you just get an idea of what the show looks like and Troika's take on the Fate universe. Nothing more. Episode 0, you are introduced to Rhaenys and reintroduced to Waver, 2 extremely important characters to the plot. Episode 2, we get our first real introduction to Grey, who is there for the viewers to learn about the magic of the universe of Fate through her eyes. Not only that, but we get to see Troika's animation showcased. Episode 3, we are reintroduced to fan favorites like Luvia and Rhaenys, which takes more of a role in the plot than previously. Then, episode 4, which sees the return of a character from Fate Apocrypha, and once again, Rhaenys stealing the spotlight with her mystic eyes. Each episode gives you something that, especially if you're a big Fate fan, will be a great source of entertainment. By episode 4, I knew for sure I wanted to continue watching this, and as the show keeps airing newer episodes, I hope we keep introducing new characters, old characters, and interesting concepts and stories that are new and also similar to previous Fates. I think the strength of the Fate universe is using the plethora of characters at your disposal. Not using it would be incredibly silly and short-sighted. I'll say this, I know I popped when Luvia showed up in this anime. For just a minute, I think it's important we touch on Troika pretty much nailing Fate Zero's tone and aesthetics. The first generally being the color palette and character designs. Fate Zero has a certain look to it. It's got a dark tint, and from watching the first 4 episodes of Melloi, it's quite obvious that the director, Makoto Kato, wanted that to carry through to his show, and it makes complete sense. Our main character here is Waver, probably the most beloved character from that anime, so being that it's centered around him, just lift the tone and feel from Fate Zero and bring it over to Melloi. This gives established or casual Fate fans a sense of continuity between the 2 series, even though this is a spin-off. Melloi's tone, though, makes this feel like I'm watching Fate Zero 10 years later, and that's something this show perfects. This also goes for Troika's backgrounds as well, something so far I am extremely impressed with. Ufotable has some of the best looking cityscapes in anime, in my opinion. Troika obviously saw this in Fate Zero and the other Fate anime, and wanted that to carry over to their work. The attention to detail here is tremendous, offering some high fidelity visuals that are a feast for the eye. But of course, the final piece is Yuki Kajiura, who returns to compose the music in the opening and ending songs, which, by the way, are absolutely fantastic. While I do feel a lot of flavors in this score, which is different from Heaven's Feel very traditional cinematic score, I think Melloi is trying to offer a similar experience to that of Fate Zero. This makes sense, once again for the same reason why the show looks like Fate Zero. And all of these little pieces in the animation, art, and music departments work together to create a remarkably faithful Fate experience. But don't worry for fans of Troika Makoto Kato. There is still that touch that makes them wholly unique. Little things like camera angles that close in on characters, or just small things like characters being extra expressive to add to a voice actor's performance, and vice versa. If you're coming off Bluma to you and you were worried for some reason, don't be. This may be a different experience story-wise, but this is still Troika we're talking about.
Time to clean out my computer. If I don't say... Hell? Do it, you bitch. Ah,
And that's it. My hopes for this series is that it just continues to improve on the pace more and more. I think this anime's barrier to entry is already incredibly steep, as it requires you to at least watch Fate Zero. And if you want to understand where a lot of these characters came from as well, probably Unlimited Blade Works and even Fate Apocrypha. An immeasurable task for some people. And that's understandable. I don't blame people for giving up on the show upon hearing something like that. But I think this show should, by the end of its 13-episode run, should be a very welcomed and very well received addition to the Fate franchise. So thank you everybody for watching. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. Click on some of these videos, especially my Fate videos. I got a whole ton of those. Go watch those, and just so you know, I have a Patreon. If you want to support me there, go over there. I got tons of stuff. And with that being said, thank you all for watching the video. Put down in the comments what you think about Lord LMLA. Bye-bye.